Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Jackie Bailey. Jackie is the International Conversation Coach, and she inspires clients to speak with significance, triumph over trauma, and champion their challenges. She's also an author, podcaster, TEDx speaker, and she has many, many awards under her belt and lots of great information to share. Jackie, thanks for being here today.
Elizabeth, it is wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So before we dive in and get to the good stuff, just tell our audience just a little bit about who you are and how you got to this point in your life where building confidence and communication skills is what you do.
Well, thank you for that. I came upon this work a little bit by accident. Now, I had a traumatic childhood. I was living in an abusive home and I was silenced, and it changed who I was because I was told not to tell. And I didn't know what that threat meant. So I didn't tell. If anything, I'm obedient. But the bad news is that by being obedient, I grew up not being able to feel comfortable speaking out. That was just something scary to do. And it wasn't until I was an adult woman when there was another child in danger and I needed to speak up. I needed to say something to protect that potential victim of the same perpetrator. So it was then using my voice when I first realized I actually have something important to say. And ever since then, when I have shared my story on stages, every single time someone comes up to me and thanks me for sharing that because they've had a similar situation, or now they know what to call it, or now they know who they need to talk to, things like that. So my mission now in life is to make sure that no child in my stewardship is ever silenced. I want them to feel confident speaking up. I want them to understand that they have something powerful to say. And so I started the Speak, Feed, Lead project in 2019. It is a nonprofit. And ever since then, we have had public speaking courses. We've done some retreats for families and other speakers. And we coach kids to be on prestigious stages to give keynotes, and many of them are also book authors. I do work with adults as well, but I would say 75% of my clients are ages 10 to about 15-ish.
Yeah. Well, I hate to hear that you had to go through trauma to bring you where you are, but it is amazing that you were able to face that and use your experience to better yourself and obviously the people around you. And it's obvious you care about that. So
yeah, it's a blessing. It's a blessing in disguise, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're here. And, the whole point of, Speak Out, Stand Out is giving parents and educators strategies to build confidence and communication skills in their kids and teens, whether it be a similar situation and they've come from a rough childhood that they're trying to work through, or just like a lot of us. I know as a child myself, I had a great childhood, but was very afraid to speak up as well. So
Right.
whatever the circumstance is, you are bent on teaching people, and especially children, how to speak up. So I love it. And I'm so glad to have you here. And I think that our listeners are going to really get a lot from this conversation. So,
Thank you.
one of one of the things that we have talked a little bit about before when we were talking about what to talk about on this podcast, because there's so many different things that we could say. One of your topics is the 3 conversations that every child needs but rarely gets. And this really piqued my interest because we do teach a lot in our classes. It's more so the public speaking side of things. But before we get there, we have to learn how to just basic communicate first, right? And a lot of that ties to conversations that we're having with our children as parents or kids around us. So I'm very eager to learn more about this. So I'm just going to let you just jump right in and tell us, what are some of these conversations that we might be totally missing?
Yeah. Well, social media and the internet and those darn devices that we have in our hands all the time now have put a wall up between us and our children. I was raised without a cell phone, and in fact, we had an answering machine, right? So I had to be home to check to see if anybody called me or if there were messages there. Today, everything happens so quickly in an instant, and yet we aren't communicating at all well. And I know that parents are often doing the best they can, but we inadvertently and accidentally silence our kids. Now, one example I will give you is during the pandemic, we had just opened the Speak Feed Lead project studio, and it was a brick and mortar building, and we were having classes there. And then when the pandemic came, we obviously couldn't have kids there for the short term. But what I learned from my students is that they didn't want to tell their parents how frightened they were, how frustrated they were. And the reason for that is because they knew their families were already stressed out. They were worried about grandma and grandpa getting sick. They were worried about mom and dad keeping their jobs, or they were worried about what's going to happen. Am I ever going to get back to school again? Am I ever going to be able to be in sports or music? Without life experience, they didn't see that things would eventually come to an end and life might look a little bit differently. But the key to that is they didn't tell their parents. So they suffered in silence because they didn't want to add a burden to the family. And that breaks my heart because the parents need to know. The parents need to know if their child is suffering or feeling stressed or worry or anxious. But many times we as parents feel like, "No, I better not bring it up because I don't want to create any false, challenges or make them think it's worse than it is."
Yeah.
And so having the right kinds of conversations with our kids to help them feel safe to speak up, even if it might make the family focus on something else for a few minutes, it's really okay. So the first conversation I say that we all need to have with our kids is, I see you. And that's where we can ask questions like, tell me more about that. How did that make you feel when that happened? Or what would you do differently if that same thing happened again? By not judging the decisions they made about certain things, not having that mama drama, I call it, where they say, Mom, I only got a C on my math test. And mama goes, what? You're less than
Yeah.
perfect. I taught you better than that, right? I mean, we don't really say those words, but the reaction that we give to our kids, they interpret it as, I better not say anything because mom won't be happy with that.
Mm.
And it's a shame. It's a shame. I mean, in my own house, as I mentioned, I was told not to tell, and so I didn't, but I had to keep everything inside um, because I didn't, first of all, didn't really have anyone to tell. But I find that kids are so sensitive to those kinds of things, and they would just rather be quiet than speak up. And so what that does is it changes their personality. It really changes who they are. You can take a vivacious young person at 6 or 7 years old, and by shutting them down often enough, by 10 or 11, they're just quiet. They don't say anything anymore. They don't want to get involved in things. They don't have friends. They don't know how to make friends. So the first conversation is, I see you. And that allows a child to know that he's being heard, he or she's being heard without judgment. And that's really, really important.
Yeah.
The second type of conversation is, let me try. Let me try. I know that a lot of times today, we don't want our kids to feel sad. We don't want them to feel lonely. We don't want them to be frustrated. And we tend to want to solve those problems for them because we don't want them to feel, But the
Right.
reality is,
Right.
reality is they've got to feel.
Yeah.
If they don't feel sadness once in a while, if they don't feel excitement or happiness or whatever it is, even if they don't get angry once in a while, they aren't going to understand what it feels like to not be having those emotions. And so the kind of questions that you can ask kids about let me try is, what do you think about that? Or how would you describe that in your own words? Because sometimes kids don't want to speak up because they don't know how to say it.
Mhm.
So asking questions like that, and when you think about it, every relationship started with the conversation. And so we need to make our conversations as powerful as possible so that people feel that they are being heard and that they matter, especially our kids. I mean, if we're not helping our kids to feel that way, what else are we doing, right?
Right.
Um, and then the third kind of conversation is, you're safe with me, which is when you help your child to feel that the parent is trustworthy, that they can share something with them that might be hard, it might be scary. But this one is not just about speaking, it's about creating an environment in your home where children can feel like, oh, I can go talk to my mom. I can share this with her or with my dad. And so that usually, that third type of conversation takes a little bit longer to nurture, right? But from day one, we need to and should be willing to not overreact with our kids and not judge them so that they do feel like they can come tell us what's really bothering them.
Yeah.
And then I think it's important that we don't solve the problem, is that we say, well, what do you think you should do? And just let them share the answer to the solution. I mean, a lot of kids today are being bullied at school or they're being teased, and parents feel so heartbroken when they know that's happening to their child. And, I mean, they should feel heartbroken. But if a child doesn't work through the solution, his or herself, then they aren't going to learn how to negotiate those emotions later on.
Yeah.
So those are the three types of conversations: is I see you, let me try, and you're safe with me.
I think, and one of the last things you said was not solving the problems for them. For me, that immediately rang is like, oh, that's the hard one, and I feel like a lot of listeners probably are
Yeah,
experiencing the same thing. I do actively make these, have conversations with my kids, and I prompt them to talk about things and describe their feelings. But the second it's something sad or bad, we want to fix it because, of course, we
right.
don't want to see our babies sad or upset.
Yeah,
But you're absolutely right. If we fix everything, they will never learn how to do it themselves. Or, like you said, to even just experience those emotions. That's a great point to consider, that they need to consider, though they need to
yeah,
experience those emotions. And it's so much better for them to experience them in the safety of their home when they're young, as opposed to, when they're an adult and they're out in the world and trying to navigate anger and things like that.
absolutely. Yeah.
And one thing I just wanted to add too, with what you were saying too, about when asking the questions, you made me think of a recent scenario with my son. I have two boys, and they're 17 and 13, and very, very different children. And my 13-year-old is very quiet. We call him, he's like the old soul. I always joke and say he's the most responsible person in our family, and he has been since he was 5. Like, that's just him. But he's
Right,
very quiet. And I have learned more and more lately with him to not assume that I know what's bothering him.
right,
And because I've been proven very wrong in many situations lately, when I have given him the space and prompted him and waited sometimes until he really wanted to chat, which is not always whenever I wanted to chat, But
right.
my example, and this is very minor, but we are talking about taking my family to the Caribbean. And he has, we got our passports and all of that. And he just keeps saying, I don't want to leave the country. I don't want to leave
Hmm.
the country. And I assumed he doesn't really like flying. We've flown before and he doesn't really like it. And I know that, but I assumed that was the issue.
Yeah.
Turns out one time he just randomly said, well, will they speak English in Aruba or wherever
Hmm.
we go? That's what was worrying him. He was
That's what was
afraid he
wrong.
wouldn't be able, or we wouldn't be able to communicate with anybody. And
Right.
again, my assumption was that it had to do with the flight. It had nothing to do with that. And so once he said that, I was able to say, oh, of course, buddy. Most of those places, and especially the ones we're looking at, English is, if not the number one language, it's right up there, like we'll be able to communicate with everybody. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And now he's like, okay, I'm ready to go.
Let's go.
So sometimes just assuming that we know what the
Right.
issue is, we don't, obviously, we don't know. So opening
Yeah.
up those conversations, like you just said, gives us the opportunity to learn more instead of just assuming.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important for a child to be able to share. So when they say, I don't want to leave the country, it's important to go, well, why? Is it something that you're concerned about or afraid of? Give them an opportunity to try to voice what it is they're feeling. And I'll offer two other words here too that are non-emotional. And so it might be the first thing all parents should say when their child tells them something that, would generally cause an emotional reaction, is to say, that's interesting. Hmm. Tell me more. That's interesting. Those two words can diffuse the emotional reaction that especially moms, but
Mhm.
sometimes dads can have, and that will silence a child too, because they don't want that reaction. So
Right.
that's interesting is a way to really diffuse that and help the child feel more comfortable sharing a little bit more.
That's a fantastic tip. I have never heard that before. I'm putting that in my back pocket as I personally have been really working as a parent over the past few years to slow down my responses because I
Mm,
am a reactive person and I'm going to respond sometimes without thinking through what I'm going to say. And so I love that. That still gives me a response because just not speaking is difficult,
right,
but
right.
gives me time to, like I said, control my emotions and opens up the door for them. And I wanted to add just one other thing too, when you said cell phones and social media and all that are putting up a wall between us and our families. And it is, I mean, not, I'm looking for my phone right now. Not just in the literals, I mean, but also in the literal sense, is that if that's what I'm trying to say. When we're
Yeah,
holding our phones in front of us and our kids are talking, it's literally a wall between us and our
absolutely.
face. And that's something that I have really tried to work on, partially because I realized my own son was doing it to me, and that was bothering me. And so
Yeah,
making an effort to, when they want to talk, put the phone down, unless it's something like pressing. And then I say, buddy, give me just like 30 seconds. I have to finish this real quick and then I'm all yours. But then
right.
putting the phone down, because even just holding it in your hand when they're speaking shows that that body language is showing them that you're waiting for this conversation to be done so you can go back to what you were doing. And there's not a quicker way to
Exactly.
shut somebody up than to make them feel like you don't care what they have to say.
Absolutely. We do that a lot, I think, as parents. We could have our phone or another device in our hand. They come in the door from school and we say, "Hey, honey, how was your day?" But we've got the
Yep.
phone in front of us and we're scrolling through something. Well, the child knows that you're not really interested.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that's why we get good, or we get the fine, or the whatever. Sometimes you just get a grunt. You know, it's because they have learned, mom and dad, you have taught them that they are not worth putting down that device and actually talking to. So
Mhm.
why would they give you a response that you want when you're not going to hear it anyway? So
Yeah.
that's something else we do as parents that silences our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And inadvertently, but now,
Yeah.
now that if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, that's me, you can still turn this around. And just by putting that phone down, or like you said, the computer, whatever it is, and just giving them your full attention. And most of the time, you're still going to get the, it was fine, it was boring, or
Right.
whatever. But occasionally, they might give you more and might surprise you.
Yeah, well, you need to ask the right questions, right? So, how was your
That's
day?
true. Right.
Is not a question that's going to evoke a conversation.
Right.
But you can say, "Hey, tell me something that made you smile today." Or, "Did you feel really successful today doing something?" So give them a new question,
Yeah.
that causes them to think about something, to identify a talent or a skill or something, that they enjoy or are good at. And that's another opportunity for you to build their self-worth and their self-esteem because you're asking the right kinds of questions that will allow them to do that.
Yeah. I mean, think about we talk when we're at the grocery store. How's your day? To the cashier. Good. How's yours? Good.
Yeah,
That's all it's ever going to evoke. It
it's
is
a
just
courtesy
it's
question.
a courtesy question.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So you
Well,
don't want to get in the habit of using courtesy questions with your kids.
that's a great feedback as well. So, well, on that vein, do you have any other, practical ways that we're building that confidence and communication skills from the inside out with our kids? We talked about the three conversations that we need to be having with them. We
Yeah.
need to make sure we're present whenever we're speaking with them or asking them questions. What else can we do?
Well, I think we can use their names a little bit more. In fact, there was a book written probably 100 years ago by Dale Carnegie. It was titled How to Win Friends and Influence People. I
Mhm.
am always delighted when I hear that even some college students today are still reading that book because it was revolutionary in the way of communication. I believe it was originally written for the typical salesman.
Mhm.
In those days, the salesmen were going door to door and they had to quickly earn trust with a potential customer. As soon as that woman opened the door,
Yeah.
they gotta throw the dirt in and bring out the vacuum. So there's great advice in that book as far as Dr. Carnegie says that our own name is the sweetest sound in any language. So let me repeat that and say it right. Our own name is the sweetest sound in any language. So when parents are using their child's name to start a conversation, you are connecting in a way physiologically that you might never have thought of. That you're using the child's name, you're identifying them, you're acknowledging them, and you're actually respectfully communicating with them. And they're more likely to respond to you in a different way because you're kind of asking them to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that is then you got to make eye contact with them as much as you can. Now, if you're driving and the kid's in this, passenger seat with you, of course, you got to be safe. But when you're having those conversations with your kids, it really is important for you, as we've already said, is to drop everything and sit with them and look at them and let them know that you are present. And then asking the right kinds of questions and then listening. So I have this I have cards. They're actually camp chat cards, and directors of summer camps for kids use these cards to teach communication and conversation skills within the week at camp.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fourth rule of effective conversation is to listen for keywords. So this is another way to really communicate with your kids on a new level, is as they are giving you information, you want to respond back to them using some words they actually used. That is an indication that you're hearing them and that you are sincerely interested in what they're saying. So I call that listening for keywords, and often keywords are nouns or they are emotions or words that describe emotions. Even the word best, my best friend, you can pick up on best as because that denotes excitement or happiness or something good. And then friend is a noun. So if your child says, I had lunch with my best friend Joe, there's a lot of ways you could respond using one of those words back. You could say, well, what makes Joe such a good friend? Or what do you look for in a best friend? And it opens up opportunities for you to learn a little bit more about what motivates your child. And when you know what motivates them, is it relationships? Is it achievement? Is it acknowledgement? Now you can discipline them in a way that is more powerful for them, right? And you can provide them opportunity to grow in areas that give them motivation. So those are some skills that make your conversations better. Is you address them by name, you make eye contact, you ask them curious questions, and then you listen. You listen
Yeah.
for keywords to repeat back or to respond back to them.
Yeah. I know personally, you can, I've, people who have used my names in conversations directly, most of the time salespeople, like you just said, you
Mm-hmm.
do build that layer of trust with them so much more quickly. There is something wild about it. But one question, like my son's name is Southern, but oftentimes I'll call him Bubba. Does that matter? Or is it the real name, or does it really matter?
I think if you have a pet name for your child, that's a great way to connect even deeper because that's a term of endearment, if you will. So yeah, I think pet names or abbreviated names, if that's what the child is used to, I think that's great.
Okay.
And if you're at the doctor, you want to use a professional title like doctor or Mr. or Mrs. So that doesn't mean that you just say somebody's first name,
Right.
especially if they're 50 years older than you. But but you want to address them in a respectful way, whatever that is for the occasion that you're in.
Gotcha. All right. Well, this is all you're just giving us like so many little tidbits and tips. I love this kind of conversation. But before we run out of time and wrap up, what about you started the conversation by being, saying you were told not to tell.
Mhm.
And let's say we know our child is not being abused, or they're certainly not being abused in our home. We're positive of that,
Mhm.
but they're not using their voice. Is that telling us something? Or, I mean, some kids are just more quiet than others. When do we
Yeah.
look at that and think, maybe there's something else that I need to be noticing here?
That's a really good question, Elizabeth, because a lot of parents contact me because their child is shy and they want them to be able to be more active at school or in clubs and things like that. And my first response usually is shyness isn't a problem. It's a personality trait. And even kids who eventually speak on stages, they can still be shy. I mean, you don't want to make your child an extrovert if they're not, right?
Right.
But what you do want to find out is, are they comfortable speaking to people? Are they comfortable making friends? And if they could do things better in one of those areas, what would that help them with? What could they achieve more of if they could make friends easier? If they knew how to contribute to a conversation. So I think it's a matter of not worrying about whether they're shy, but if they're constantly using the good, the fine in response to things, asking some of those curious questions might be the key to help them to open up more.
Mhm.
Or you might just have to say, um, what do you say when you want to make a new friend? Do you ever walk up to somebody and introduce yourself? And most kids don't have those skills unless they've been
Right.
taught. So
Right.
that's something that parents could help them to discover. I think we all want to contribute somehow to something. And right now, our kids are at school. They want to be able to contribute. They want to feel like they're safe there, like they have good friends. Sometimes they just don't always have the skills to do that. So I think it's not a matter of if your kids are shy, you've got to fix it. It's a matter of find out what's making them uncomfortable in social situations and then help them to overcome that lack of comfort.
I love it. I love it. And you have classes and resources and things like that to do these things, to help parents do these things. And you
Mhm.
mentioned as well, you also work directly with children. Tell us a little bit about like what we'll make sure we link to everything so it's super easy for people to hop over and find the information. But what kind of information can people go check out from your website?
Well, you can go to speakfeedly.org, but the best way to really find everything that we're doing is JackieBailey360.com, because that's a hub for both my for-profit business and nonprofit business. And the best part about it is you can link directly to the TEDx talks that my youth clients have given. So they're all there, and you can watch those and see the brilliance and the magnificence that when given an opportunity, these kids can shine.
Absolutely.
Generally a TEDx talk is a problem that you have personally and emotionally related to, and how other people within your demographic or something like that have also found that to be a problem, and then how you solved it and how you might suggest that someone use your solution to help them. That's basically the gist of a TEDx talk. And it is amazing when kids discover, hey, I did solve a problem for myself, and it'd be really cool if I could share with other people how they might solve it too, just by using my methodology. And so even shy kids have given
Right.
TEDx talks, but
That's what I was gonna say. And don't be listening and
yeah,
be like, oh, my kid would never do that. You never know.
you
You
never
never
know.
know.
It's just what I have learned is until they know that they actually have something to say, they will stay quiet. But once someone has helped them discover how they did learn from that experience that they had and how it's shaped them to know something different now because of that experience, then they are so willing to learn how to deliver that message in
Yeah.
a bigger way,
And what a
right?
life-changing experience.
It is. It's absolutely. I don't really know that I can say this. I have no scientific proof, but I really feel, Elizabeth, that none of the kids I've worked with will ever be tempted to take their own lives.
Mm.
And it's because they know their own value. They have empathy for other people and feel like if my story could matter that much, if I learned that person's story, I know that I would probably like them or they could inspire me. So they have a different view on everybody else on the planet besides they feel empowered themselves. So they're not tempted
Yeah.
to let go of life. They're willing to face it and
Yeah.
realize this next experience I have is just going to be another teaching moment for
Yeah.
me.
And as parents, what more could we want for our kids, for them to be empathetic and empowered? That's
Exactly.
it. That's it.
Yep.
So, well, Jackie, I am so grateful to have had you here today. I have learned a lot personally. I'm sure everybody listening is. And again, if you're listening or watching, the links are right around you. Just you'll be able to find them. Go check out Jackie, see what she's got on her website and the different resources. And again, just thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving me voice today, Elizabeth.
Thanks for listening, everyone.